Okay, welcome to another bite-sized PG for the elementary classroom. Today our topic is interactive word walls. My name is Sheena Biffert. I'm the elementary science consultant, and with me today is
Rebecca Hartwick, ELL consultant.
awesome. So we're going to get right into it.
Just wanted to share a quote to start. The environment should act as an aquarium which reflects the ideas, ethics, attitudes, and culture of the people who live in it. This is what we are working towards. And this quote is from Loris Malaguzzi, who's an early childhood educator who founded the education philosophy known as the Reggio Emilia approach. And interactive word walls would be an example of how we can create this exciting environment for our students. Quickly talking about the benefits of interactive word walls, they provide visual support, contextual learning, active participation, social interaction, cultural relevance, differentiation, vocabulary development. They're flexible and dynamic, and they provide motivation for our students in the classroom. If you're interested in starting an interactive word wall in your classroom, here are some things to keep in mind to help you. Some tips and tricks. Keep the interactive word wall at eye level and also accessible to your students. These word walls can be non-permanent. They can include realia or real-life objects. Color coding will help you sort the ideas on your word wall, and they can be student created. Here we can see some examples of word walls in the classroom. A very simple way to start a word wall would be to have the students' names of your classroom, of your class students, on a word wall on an alpha box here. The students' names could be sorted by the letter that they start with. You could also include some information about the students to help you get to know your classmates better.
And something I noticed, Rebecca, on that word wall, which is a really great example of color coding, is how they've color coded words by subject. And the teacher has also added a word wall legend at the top of their word wall so the students can remember which color is for what. So, for example, you see your social studies words in green and your science words in blue and your language arts words in orange, math words in red, and they're just easier for the kiddos to find once they become familiar with that legend.
That's such a great point. Thanks, Sheena. Also, on this page, we see a cross-curricular board. So you can see all different subjects put onto one word wall, and also lots of color coding there that is a place where students could go back to refer back to what they've learned in their different subjects. Here we're going to talk about home language on word walls. Many classes have ELL learners who are level 1 and 2 and who would be participating in your class using home language. Interactive word walls can include visuals with students' home language. This is a benefit to some of your students and a detriment to none of them. So you can see here in the example, we have words in English related to To Kill a Mockingbird, and then students have added their home language on the bottom to help relate to the English words. We also have some jars here with some examples of words in the Blackfoot language and also lists how to pronounce those words. So another example of home language.
And something I'll also point out is the idea of including sketch notes onto your word walls. So both of these word walls have allowed students to incorporate their sketch notes into their contributions for that word wall, which could really help some of our ELL learners and all learners by having those visuals.
Perfect. And Tina's going to talk about some word walls for specific subjects now.
Right. So we can start off with our word wall being very general at the beginning of the year. And as the year goes on and we start to dig into our subjects a little bit more, we can start to create subject-specific word walls. Now, at the beginning, you saw that there was a word wall that had all the subjects on it, and that's totally fine. So this is just something that potentially can happen as the year goes on and doesn't have to happen all the time and could just happen if it makes sense. So here's some examples of what that can look like in an elementary classroom if you were to create some subject-specific word walls. So here we're looking at science to begin. And when we're looking at our subject-specific word walls, we want to keep in mind that we will probably include all tiered words, tier 1, 2, and 3. So those everyday words, those tier 1 words, that academic vocabulary that we see across subjects, that's our tier 2 words, and then that subject-specific language, that's our tier 3 words. So most of the time, you find all these different levels of words on your subject-specific word wall, but at some points, you might have a word wall specific to tier 1 words. And so there's an example here for you, the plant example here. This is an example of a tier 1 word wall. If you were introducing, the process of scientific methods at the beginning of your year, you might create a board just specific to that. That's more of tier 2 words for us in science because those words like explore and record and observe, they get touched on in every subject in our classroom. And then down at the bottom is an example of a tier 3 word wall for specific to science, and it's specific to the water cycle. So here we're really digging into those subject specific words, those bigger words like evaporation, precipitation. Now on the next slide, we have some examples of what a science word wall could look like with a mixture of these different types of words. But something else I wanted to bring your attention to is the way they've built these words. Well, these word walls. These word walls, like if you take a closer look, are all non-permanent. So they all have objects on them that can be removed. So students can come up to this board and they can take a word off and they can take it to their desk and they can use it in their writing and then they can bring it back to the wall. They've used various different ways to put up these words like Rebecca mentioned earlier, push pins or magnets. However you want to design that board is up to you. However, whatever works for your kiddos in your classroom. But really important for it to be non-permanent so those kiddos can interact with it. Another thing that I want you to notice is that it's student created. So there's a lot of words on these word walls that students have actually written out themselves. They've included some sketches there to make sense of the word a little bit. And so it just becomes a lot more authentic and meaningful for the kiddos. And as we create this board together, we will find that our kiddos will be more they'll be just more excited to go up to it and use it and interact with it. So yeah, we'll move on. So here on the next slide again is some subject specific word walls, this time specific to math. Again, a board can include all our tiered words, but if you want to, you can sort your words on a word wall. So this first example on the top left here is an example of how a teacher has sorted her math words. By the different tiered words. So she has an everyday word section, she has an academic word section, and then she has a subject specific word section. And on this board, they're specifically looking at algebra. What's pretty cool about this is that this board can change as they go through different units, okay? So maybe the academic words might stay the same, and that's just an indication for students that those academic words never change no matter what specific organizing idea we're learning in math. So maybe we're learning about algebra, and then next we're learning about fractions. Well, those academic words will stay there. They're not going to change. And it shows the kiddos this progression as they move through their math units in their grade. So another cool way to design a word wall. On the next slide here, we have some examples for social studies. Again, These word walls can have words from all different tiers or just specific tiers. So here's an example of a subject-specific Tier 3 social studies word wall. And here again, the students are engaging in this board. So this board is at eye level. You can kind of see a student there tucked in the corner. She's able to look right at it. She's able to interact with it. It's non-permanent. You can see she could take those down. But what's really important here to focus on is that it's eye level and it's at the kiddos level where they can take things on and off. So something else to consider. So when you're looking at your space in your classroom, you want to try and consider how tall your kiddos are and where you could set it up to have the most interaction. Okay, so here again, we're looking at religion, similar thing, right? We've got our everyday words, academic words, and subject-specific words. What's really wonderful here is the color coding that they used, and then also that they helped build this word and word wall. They actually built the rosary. They actually each had a part in building the word wall and the board. So it became very authentic and meaningful for them. All right.
Okay, I'm going to talk about how our word walls can be portable. You can see some examples here. The first thing I wanted to talk about is the little hooks with the rings. You can see on those rings, there's a number of different words on there. The students would be able to come up to the board, take them off the hook, take those um, rings to their desk, flip through them, and look at all the different words and then be able to use them to help them complete a task at their desk. You can also see it looks like an alpha box has been put on the wall, and then students are able to sort those words based on the letter that they start with. So you can see from A to Z, and then students would then be able to take all the A words, put them on a ring, and then hang all the A words under the A box on the wall. So this really helps with students learning with the sorting and interacting with them, and they're more connected to them if they're able to do that themselves and then put it on the wall. And you can also see another alphabet example there with words that could be taken down off the wall and then stuck back on them under the correct letter. Next, we'll talk about bringing in the natural world. So you can see a picture here with the jars. It's an example of a word wall that's not on a wall and it can be moved. It's an interactive activity where students have collected the physical item and then label it, possibly in home language. This photo shows the item labeled in English and Blackfoot and includes the pronunciation. And so I'm not sure if you can see on the jars, but there are the actual seeds are inside of the jar. And then students have sketched what the seeds look like, made little tags and put them on the outside of the jar. So they've created their own visual for that real life item. We also have some tree cookies there, which students have then labeled with letters, and they have created an alphabet on their wall using the natural items from their environment. We'll also talk about word walls on the go. These ones are ones that you can see, you can move things around on the folder. And also that folder can be moved to a student's desk. Maybe they're stored on a shelf, but then can be moved to the desk to interact with. And you can also see another example of the alpha box there that, again, students could take to their desk and use to help them to complete a task. Using folders is an excellent way to have an interactive word wall as well. Sometimes students really struggle with vocabulary and need to be able to see it in front of them to help them use it. So you could see possibly maybe a Division II class there with a number of different vocabulary words. And then you can also see a folder that includes some visuals. This would be excellent for our ELL students. They can look at a picture and then all those pictures are labeled with important words that they will need to increase their vocabulary.
Okay, and then linked here for you, you'll be able to find this link just below our video on YouTube in the description, is a collection of interactive word wall activities for you to use in your classroom. They're good for little kiddos and older kiddos as well. Some examples of some word wall activities that you might find in this collection are a really simple one. A lot of us probably know it is charades. So where students act out a word from a word wall for their peers to guess. Another example is the activity called add an ending, where you would take a word off the wall and add a different ending to it. So maybe you took the word plant off the wall and you added the ending ing, so it becomes planting, etc. Another one is cartoon captions, or how I use it in my classroom was current event captions, where you have students create captions for images using the words from the word wall. So, for example, I would just show them an image of a current event that happened that day or the night before, and I would get them to just create a caption of what they thought was happening in that image using words from the word wall. And what this did is it just started off discussions for us about, science topics or social studies topics that we then continued throughout the day. So it was a really nice way to integrate learning across subjects. And then a favorite of my students was hot seat, the activity hot seat. So students were in partners. One student was in the hot seat. They couldn't see the word wall. The other student picked a word from the word wall. And the student in the hot seat had to ask questions to try to figure out which word their partner picked off the wall. And so this was just a really great way to get our kiddos practicing asking those questions, those better questions to help us get the information we're trying to get. So it was a great way to practice that skill in the classroom during this activity, which is an important skill for our students to be utilizing throughout the day in all subjects.
And then I wanted to add as well that all of these activities really encourage talk time in your class. And talk time is the best way for ELL students and all students to be able to increase their vocabulary and to learn new words and to feel comfortable participating in their classrooms. So again, an activity like Hot Seat is such a great example of a way to encourage talk time in your classroom. And then lastly, just wanted to talk about some word wall extensions. We've talked a couple times about the alpha box. Here's an alpha box again. Students could take words off of the word wall and then sort them by the letter that they start with onto their alpha box at their desk. Another example here, we have a Frayer model. The way you work with these is you would put a vocabulary word in the center in the circle, and then students could use information from the word wall and be able to populate that information onto their Frayer model. For example, they could write a definition either in home language or in their own words. They could draw a picture of the vocabulary word, which your word wall would have some visuals on it, so they could use those visuals and then put them onto their own. And these could be simple sketches. They don't have to be complicated, and then they could label their picture. They could do examples of that vocabulary word, and then non-examples, so things that that vocabulary word is not. And then lastly, we have a vocabulary personal dictionary, similar to the Frayer model, using word in home language, a definition, and then a picture or diagram. And again, those word walls would be providing all of that information that students could use to extend onto activities at their desk.
Awesome. Well, that's it from us about interactive word walls. We're happy you joined us. We hope you got a tip or two. And if you have any more questions, please don't hesitate to contact us, myself in the elementary consultant room at elementary at cssd.ab.ca or the ELL team.
Yeah, and that's Rebecca Hartwick at cssd.ab.ca. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.